Wow. Thank you, Tiffany. I would say drop the mic, but it's clearly attached to your, that was incredible. Hey everybody, Steve Patrick with the Forum for Community Solutions. Welcome, welcome. Let me just kick off the opening plenary with a land acknowledgement. And so we're gathered here in Los Angeles and pausing to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Tongva, Chumash, Tatvium, and Serrano people. We have lived in harmony, who have lived in harmony with this land since time immemorial. Los Angeles is also now home to one of the largest urban Native American populations in the country, a direct result of federal relocation policies that displaced Native people from their homelands and attempted to sever cultural ties. Yet Native communities here and across California remain vibrant, resilient, and rooted in resistance. In 2019, Governor Newsom became the first governor in the U.S. history to acknowledge and apologize for the state-sponsored genocide of indigenous people. And he established a Truth and Healing Council to begin the long process of reckoning and repair. At the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions, we not only honor the original stewards of this land, we are humbled to stand in partnership with Native leaders and communities. If you're one of the Native Indigenous, self-identified as Native Indigenous tribal in our community, please just raise a fist with us so we can acknowledge that you are here. All right. I know that my Taos Pueblo folks, they like to sleep in. I know that. So they're out there somewhere. They'll be here soon. We are also proud to now partner with California Native Vote Project. Some of you remember the incredible leadership of the California Native Vote Project at our opening plenary in Boston, or our second plenary in Boston last year. So we're partners with California Native Vote Project, which is organizing powerfully for justice across the state. We are also honored to partner with Native communities across the country in our Native, Indigenous, and tribal community of practice, including the Yurok and Tolowa people in California's far north Del Norte County, who have been a part of the Opportunity Youth Forum for over a decade. We recognize that acknowledging the land is just one step. We are committed to deepening our relationships, learning from indigenous knowledge, and supporting the sovereignty and self-determination of Native peoples here and everywhere. A lot of you were at the incredible performance last night. I thought the land acknowledgement that happened spontaneously from that lead singer of the band was super powerful, and I was really inspired to see that. I also just want to acknowledge that this network, were some of you with us when we did the crazy trip out to Hopi and then to Jemez Pueblo for the feast day, and that was the one time so far where we have not done a land acknowledgement, and it's because that land wasn't stolen. It wasn't taken. And I want to make sure as a network, you all encourage us to do this, that we get to do that again. Let's go to places where the land is still in Native hands. So we'll figure that out. We'll keep doing that. And until then, we will always acknowledge the place where we stand. And so we stand with our Native brothers and sisters. Thanks, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. It is beautiful to be with all of you and to be holding space for our somatic practice this morning. And thank you, Steve, for that land acknowledgement. It's a beautiful segue to really entering into holding the sacred space that our original people held and continue to hold in their practices. My name is Elena Mireles Hill. I am founder and principal consultant of Liberación Consulting. And I work with individuals and collectives to be in intentional and right relationship with ourselves and with one another so that we can more sustainably and joyfully hold the deep work of change. of social change and ultimately liberation. I know we're in challenging times right now. It is heavy, and oftentimes it can feel overwhelming. It can often feel like a cloud that is just over us. With everything coming at us, we can feel oftentimes helpless, hopeless, stuck, and that we don't have agency. And it's really especially important in these times to come back from that big cloud that's hanging over us and to come back to what we do know, to what we do have control over, to where our agency is, so that we don't give our power away, that we are grounded in our truth, in our power, and the wisdom that has been with us for generations, that has been passed on from our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, our great-great-grandmothers, and many lineages further on beyond. It is so important that we come to be in right relationship with ourselves, because if we're not in right relationship with ourselves, how can we be doing the work of community and being in right relationship with others? We're all holding people in very intentional and sacred ways. This work is deep work that we're all called to. And so we have to start here. We're all balls of energy, and energy is surrounding us all the time, everywhere. And so we have agency to figure out what is the energy we want to hold in our day? What is the vibration we want to hold? What is the attitude we want to hold? And I promise you that if we are clear about the energy that we hold and how we want to hold our authentic and beautiful power that you are called to bring into this world, it will meet you. It will meet you in your day. It will meet you in your life. So if you are seeking to find learning today, imagination, expansion, connection, that energy will meet you. So I'm going to invite us into a brief somatic practice. I want you to know that this is all by invitation. And so do what feels right for you. It is all by invitation. So I'm going to invite you to find a comfortable spot in your chair. I know that might mean you have to drop your fork or your plate a little bit for a few moments. I invite you to find a firm place for your feet on the ground, to really feel Mother Nature, this holy sacred ground, holding you, to sit up straight in your seat. If it's comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes, and if not, just find a spot for your gaze. I invite you to hold your hands in your lap or to your side, really signaling that you are open to receive, open to this day, open to all that wants to meet you. And just settle into your body. Just feeling the ground pulling you into your seat. I'm going to invite us into some collective breaths together. The power of our collective breath together is so, so beautiful. So I'm going to invite us to together inhale, hold, and exhale. Good. And if there's any sound that wants to come out as you exhale, just a sigh. Allow yourself, trust your body, trust your wisdom to do that. Again, a deep inhale. Hold and exhale. Beautiful, beautiful. And one more deep inhale. Hold and exhale. Wonderful. And I'm going to invite you to just see if you can get into that heart space, into the center of your heart. This is the space of connection, of love, of compassion. And I want to see if you can access that deep wisdom that's within you, that truth that you know so deeply and intimately. What is the intention and the vibration that you want to hold in your day? See if you can connect with that. Is that connection or learning or imagination? And it might be a few words that come to mind that you really want to hold. See if you can tap into that energy. Then I wanted you to imagine a light coming around that intention, a light coming around that intention and expanding that intention. So if you're seeing love, seeing that pulse with that intention, and imagine that moving through your body, that energy expanding and moving through your body, up through your head, up through your chest, through your arms, down through your legs into the ground. Again, hold that intention, keep seeing it, and again, see if you can see that energy moving back again up through your body. Back up through your legs, your stomach, your chest, and your arms, expanding, deepening, grounding. I'm going to invite you, as feels comfortable, to bring your right hand over to your heart, your left hand over your stomach, solar plexus area. And your solar plexus is your place of your personal power. It is our place of our self-knowing. It is a place of our truth. And so we're connecting our heart energy with our power today, that our individual power might lead into this beautiful collective power. So I want you to hold that intention between that space right there, connecting those two places. And as you feel comfortable, I want to invite us to bring that intention out loud into our space and really to receive that energy all around us, our neighbors are sharing. So as you feel comfortable, I want you just to bring it out into the space. What's the intention that you want to hold for your vibration in the day? Shout it out. Beautiful. 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 I heard power, love, connection, and so much more. So I want you to just hold this here. One last collective breath. Inhale. Exhale. I want you to open your eyes, bring your hands up if you can. Bring that energy deep into the room. Let it vibrate out of your fingertips. Give yourself a hug. Say, knowing you're so grateful for being here, for showing up, for doing the work. I love you. I hope you have a beautiful and powerful day.
What a beautiful grounding. Please, give Velena some more love. So welcome to Los Angeles, Aspen Opportunity Youth Forum Network, the belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose community. I'll say it once again, we made it to May in LA. Give yourself some vigorous love and applause. Yes. I am Monique Miles, and I'm a vice president at the Aspen Institute. And most importantly, I have the honor and privilege of working with the dopest team on earth to deliver some heartfelt, love-shaped, designed to win on policy, rooted in justice content for you all. If you are a member of the Aspen Forum team, please stand up. Come on, stand up, let's be recognized. Yes, show them some love. We do these 2 times a year, and this team brings intellect, passion, creative innovation, and their hearts to the design and delivery of every single convening. And as Jamil would say, this is the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious team on earth. So thank you for showing them some love, because I promise you, they brought love here with them today. And then continuing in a spirit of celebration, please let me acknowledge and thank the team at the Los Angeles Opportunity Youth Collaborative, the LA OYC. Yes. Thank you, Lori Collier, Melanie Farravon. Thank you, Brescia. Thank you to the entire team in LA that partnered with us to design this convening. You see, the team in LA, they're so thorough. They are so comprehensive. When they tell the story of the work in LA tomorrow, which, by the way, is going to connect all of their system change work with the belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose work, you're going to hear this thread again and again, all rooted in relationships that sit at the center of the many different ways that they drive meaningful system change across LA for Opportunity Youth. And so I really want to say from my heart, thank you to our family in LA for being with us in every step in this journey and then hosting this network here this week. Thank you. And then I have to shout it out. I mentioned it yesterday, but I wanted to give some more love because it's worth it. So this is also the 10th anniversary of the LA Opportunity Youth Collaborative. And let me just say this. Yes, 10 years matters, like the time it matters, because it takes so much time to do meaningful, transformative system change. But what's also really important to acknowledge is the how they've been able to drive impact. And what's so meaningful is that, yes, all of that work has happened here in LA while also driving the California Opportunity Youth Network with so many partners across this room to really win on policy outcomes in post-secondary and workforce development for OY, for foster care youth. So please join me in congratulating them on 10 years of impact. And speaking of impact, you know I have to tell some impact stories from across our network, because all of our communities are working every day on this meaningful, transformative change. And so really what I wanted to do is just quickly lift up a few stories, and because we're in Los Angeles, it feels right to start with the Opportunity Youth Collaborative here and just share that the collaborative convened by the Alliance for Children's Rights, joined by John Burton Advocates for Youth, expanded Next Up, a college support program targeting transition-age youth in all 115 California community colleges. Next Up is specifically designed for foster youth, which provides a range of services, including stabilization supports, right? So books, supplies, transportation, tutoring, food, emergency housing, what we know every young person needs to be successful. JBED led an advocacy campaign to increase funding for Next Up in the state budget, and that campaign resulted in Next Up receiving an additional $30 million for a total of $50 million to institutionalize and expand the program at community colleges. For the first time, state funding will also fund the program at 4-year colleges with an additional $18 million earmarked. Show them some love. But the influence doesn't stop there, because advocates were successful in encouraging Next Up to relax attendance requirements so that students can enroll part-time if they meet with an advisor. This was an important win, y'all, because LA OYC's research with students in Los Angeles Community College demonstrated that full-time attendance requirements were a major barrier to foster youth enrolling in other on-campus support programs. So again, in total, 115 colleges received funding, including 69 community colleges, that previously did not have a Next Up office on campus. And as a result, each college has programming in place to ensure young people transitioning from the foster care system are enrolled in college have the supports needed to reach their goals. Show them some love, please. And this isn't in case you missed it. I love telling this story. The New York Opportunity Youth Network launched a statewide Back to School for Who campaign in support of a bill designed to establish the Youth Disconnection Prevention and Recovery Ombudsperson in the New Jersey Department of Education. They also advocated for the School Disconnection Prevention Task Force. The bill was signed into state law in January of 2024 with bipartisan support by the governor. And the bill will impact at least 100,000 young people in New Jersey who have disconnected from school and careers, and at the same time, it sets the stage for significantly more targeted statewide interventions for Opportunity Youth. And then that's not all, because the Newark Collaborative also successfully won on the passage of the New Jersey Youth Bill Act. This legislation creates an appropriation in the state budget for youth bill programs for at least the next 5 years, establishing for the very first time a public revenue stream for these programs outside of the Federal Department of Labor, which is an important strategy for blending and braiding the public and private funding we know is necessary to sustain this work. Now, taking us over to San Antonio in Texas, the OY Collaborative there is led by the City of San Antonio, Department of Human Services, and the United Way of San Antonio and Bexar County, who are the community's largest funders of Opportunity Youth programming in the area. The collaborative has prioritized data collection and management, funding alignment, and achieving community-wide goal of reducing youth disconnection. In partnership with Aspen, the collaborative is working to do the following. They're working to continuously align their measures with our common indicators across the city so that they can continuously, year after year, track the decrease in youth disconnection. They also have launched a needs assessment to identify gaps in what Opportunity Youth need in the community to foster better wide city alignment on OY outcomes. They're also participating in a longitudinal study measuring the long-term outcomes of Opportunity Youth so that there's community memory, historical memory of this work. They also have significant investments from the City of Antonio in services for all youth, allocating $10 million ARPA funding to youth programs, which included an investment of $5.3 million in services specifically for Opportunity Youth. And then recently, the next level, the city's Comprehensive Dropout Reengagement Center, was replicated by the 4th largest school district in Texas, demonstrating not just the scalability, but the expanded impact of this work. And in Houston, the Greater Houston Opportunity Youth Collaborative partnered with local and national public and private funders to raise and distribute more than $11 million to regional OY providers. The collaborative also piloted a peer navigator program with 4 partner organizations to provide supports to OY with the intent to recruit, train, and deploy former OY as peer navigators across the city, working to increase connection with current Opportunity Youth. And now I just want to mention a few brief but really important policy and advocacy wins across other communities. Like in the state of Massachusetts, they passed Mass Reconnect to make community college free for those 25 and older, but then they passed Mass Educates to make community college free for everyone. The state also passed tuition equity law that allows undocumented students to attend public college at in-state rates to access state financial aid funds. Also in Boston, yeah, thank you, right? Yes, it matters. In Boston, they also did some work around the FAFSA. So the 2024 FAFSA crisis, Boston Public Schools, in response to it, with local nonprofits and CBO partners, conducted a FAFSA completion campaign. Partners used their Success Boston data on enrollment, progress, and completion to identify college-aspiring graduates who did not complete the FAFSA and assigned outreach across different organizations to complete the FAFSA completion rate. And here's what we know. What we know is that FAFSA completion is important because it makes college more affordable, right? It unlocks grants that you didn't know about. It unlocks work-study funds potentially. But the other thing that we know about just completing a FAFSA is it has been connected to research-based higher rates of enrollment and higher rates of persistence. So a campaign to get more young people just to complete the FAFSA matters. And in Maine, an act to expand banking access to minors, titled LD 752, was passed to encourage financial institutions to remove the requirement of a guardian's signature to open an account. This legislation matters because it came directly from young people who shared that just getting a guardian signature created unsafe conditions for them. Right? So passing policies that keep our young people safe as they are transitioning into adulthood. But that's not all, y'all. Because in Hawaii, the Hawaii Act of 102, which is titled HB 2042, it appropriated funds for the Department of Health to contract for the provision of youth mental health and wellness services to address the mental health and wellness needs of youth in the state of Hawaii. This is a win as our partners expand their belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose work and blend and braid public and private funding to meet the full needs of young people. Please give it up for these communities, y'all. There are so many stories to tell. Impact and influence lives at the heart of how we think about learning and our relationship between learning and impact. While I am not able to lift up every single community in our network, we acknowledge and celebrate the work of every single community in our network. We are thankful for the tireless way you organize to improve outcomes for young people, and we look forward to continuing to lift up the many different kinds of ways communities achieve impact across our network. And now, I want to build on the theme of impact and influence because, see, we really appreciated the time community shared with us to co-design this particular convening agenda. You were so thoughtful about sharing your learning needs and your specific priorities for our time together. Between the calls we did with members across the network and the various communities of practice our team convenes to deepen both learning and impact, coupled with the priorities of our belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose portfolio, please know that we have heard your requests for learning content, and we have worked to design a rich and substantive learning agenda for you all. We've attended to your requests for insights into the federal landscape, to state-level community power building, to deep dives and big bets, ranging from narrative change strategies to creative art youth pathways, to designing community-wide ecosystems for belonging, to winning on policy in the current political landscape, to reimagining justice. We have curated an agenda in partnership with so many of you around this room that is designed to engage your minds, yes, to nourish your hearts for sure, and to deepen your fortitude, reaffirm your purpose, and connect you with your kinship community while continuing to celebrate all that we have accomplished together to date and set our collective sights on the expansive and just future that is waiting for all of us. So in closing, I want to share a story. For those of you who were with us last night, I want to ask you once again, as Steve did, please make some noise. Come on. If you got to dance, if you got to celebrate, if you enjoyed Las Cafeteras, thank you for making some noise. Because see, last night when Steve was introducing that fantastic band, he talked about the Emma Goldman quote that we often cite, which is, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be in your revolution." And see, that is our truth. It is a core value that we hold. And recently, I learned in a personally transformative way that there's even more, there's an even deeper truth to this story. See, about 2 years ago, it was heavy on my heart, the need to equip myself with some new tools to do this work. In many ways, it sometimes felt to me like we were dealing with the legacy of harm and trauma, the legacy of racism and white supremacy, versus addressing the harm and the trauma at the root level. And part of what I wanted to bring to the fore in our work was an unflinching, unwavering, and consistent commitment to holding the light of everyone at the center of the solutions we design together. Because in our efforts to make an economic case to include Opportunity Youth, or to advocate for the political upside of including an entire population in an electoral campaign, the truth is that these young people deserve to access opportunities because they are, just because they are. And so I went back to school to pursue a doctorate. And what I found is that I had an even deeper and more personal question in my soul. What I really, really wanted to know is, how did my ancestors, whether they were directly connected to my lineage or not, how did the Black women who came before me, the Sojourner Truths, the Harriet Tubmans, the Harriet Jacobs, the Ida B. Wells, how did they do their equity and justice work in a period of time when they had so much less and the threat of violence was so much more present? Every day, these women set out to do their justice work knowing that they may not live to see the next day, that their children may not make it home, that they may never hug their partner, their brother, their sister, their auntie, or their cousins again. And yet these women set about their work, boldly, courageously, driven with purpose. And my soul wanted to be in an intergenerational dialogue with them. I wanted to read their writing. I wanted to try to understand the life force that sustained them in dark times and really inspired them to dare to imagine freedom and work toward it every day. And while I still don't have all of the answers, there are two things that I believe were true for them then that are true for all of us today. The first thing is that everything we endeavor to achieve as people, from the end of slavery to the Love is Love movement, must first be conceived in our minds. The ideas of freedom, the idea of a just and inclusive democracy, all of this begins in our minds. In other words, this work requires imagination. It requires the active nourishment of our imagination as the birthplace of our first dreaming of and then acting toward a more just, equitable, and inclusive future. And this is important because we are living through a period of time aimed at dismantling policies and laws that were gateways to opportunity for so many, yes? But at the heart of these actions is an attack on our imagination. And so we must continuously nurture, through intergenerational dialogue, stories, coalition building, and action, a robust, hearty, and expansive imagination for everyone, for our collective future. And my other takeaway from Divinity School is transmutation. So the literal definition of transmutation is the action of changing from one state into another. And as I sat with the scholarship and writings of so many womanist theologians that came before me, my revelation was that so many of these women were able to sit with at the gathering table. They bore witness to the pain and heartache and suffering of the injustices happening around them, yes? And with great intentionality, with great purpose, they created spaces that turned that pain into other forms of joyful expression. They danced together. They created music together. They shared stories. They shared food. They were in transformative, loving, nurturing community with each other in those communal spaces, those dances, those songs, the singing, the spoken word, the breath, the collective meditation and breathing. All of these serve to place at the center of what they were doing, healing, so that they could wake up and do their justice work another day. And so this is important, Aspen Forum Network, because see, we are a place of healing. As Jamil says, I'm quoting Jamil again, he always says that the H is for healing and our belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose work, but it's silent. It's a silent H. And that's important because this is a place that we know by the time you've shown up, if you are standing for truth, for equity, for justice, then you probably showed up feeling some kind of way. And so I shared this to say that we know that, we recognize that, and we've thought as much about what that means as we've thought intellectually about policy and advocacy, as we've thought about strategy around narrative change, as we've thought about data, measurement, impact, and outcomes, because all of this matters as we work together towards a more just and towards a more equitable future. I'll say it again. We are a healing network rooted in love, working together to transform pain into joy, imagination, vision, and a more just future. And we are so thankful that all of you are together with us on this journey. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, my fellow panelists. So no requirement to dance on up here, but you heard that we are committed to joy and dancing in this network. Thank you, Mo. Mo is getting her PhD. Mo does not fuck around, right, y'all? Sorry. My bad. Can you scratch that from the camera? Can you delete that? This is awesome. What a crowd. My job is to cover for a minute while Ryan gets the chairs up front. We're good? Okay. We're going to have a great panel conversation. I think really we'll build on Monique's pre-comments, kickoff comments. And it's going to be deep. It's great to have a full house. There's even people in the old guy Muppet seats back there. That'll be great. Thanks for being here, everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to come on up, and we'll get into a conversation about kind of how we respond to the context that Mo laid out so well. This is, yes, it's a moment, but it's also a part of a historical context. So come on up, panelists, please. Join me up here, and we'll get into these comfy seats and get into a good conversation. Appreciate y'all. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. This is a powerhouse crew, y'all. This is going to be fun. So, let me introduce our panelists briefly, but pull out your phones if you have them, and then put them away after. And just if you have a minute, check out these bios, because they're on the app. You can go, everybody's on the app, right? And the kind of history and the stories of the lives lived of our four esteemed panelists are deep. Stories of second-generation immigrants who have made big change in the world. Stories of deep commitments coming up out of the child welfare system and then changing it. Stories of coming out of Alabama and going to Harvard like Mo. It's deep. It's really deep. And so I'll just start with our quick intro and title, but there's more to this. And I really encourage you to check out the bios on this esteemed panel. So all the way down at the end, we'll start with Brenda Solorzano, who is relatively new CEO of the California Endowment. Thank you, Brenda, for being with us. There's also a few of our Montanans in the room who are swelling with pride because of her leadership at Headwaters in Montana, where she really, actually became one of the most important leaders on trust-based philanthropy in the country, full stop. And there is Secretary Tom Perez, who really probably needs no introduction, former labor secretary. Came up as an organizer, so this is a room that he can relate to. Tom's come all the way from DC to bring some knowledge and wisdom, and we appreciate Secretary Perez, you're being here with us.
Tom is a lot quicker, though. Yeah. Tom's a lot quicker.
What's that?
Tom is a lot quicker.
Tom's a little and then Bracia Gutierrez. Thank you for being with us, Bracia. Needs no introduction. A lot of the success stories that Mo was sharing about LA come from right here. So we got local representation on this panel. A leader in the Opportunity Youth work here in Los Angeles. And last but not least, Dr. Kareem Creighton, who's with the Brennan Center and is going to share some of the work, the really important democracy work that comes from Brennan. So that, and to just frame it up and set the tone, we're going to start with a kind of national perspective and then bring it to the state level and then bring it to the local. And we're going to try to have a kind of conversation where folks can build on each other. They can also take tangents. They can go where they want to go in terms of the messages that they want to share. So we've asked Tom Perez to kick it off and just with a simple question, which is, what the hell is going on in DC?
I knew when someone says a simple question.
Yeah,
It's like when someone says, I'm just a country lawyer, I always grab the phone because I know I'm about to get fleeced.
I'm just a country nonprofit leader. Yeah. So please, like, as someone who's been in the work in DC at the highest levels and now is an advocate for the right things, help us understand what this moment looks like. Help us think about how we respond to it. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here with all of you. It's been an honor to work over the years with Aspen. Monique, you inspired us all this morning. I know I speak for everyone in saying that. Thank you for the example that you set. I think one of the most important things we can do is understand this moment in time in connection with our nation's admittedly imperfect journey. You know, I think the most important dependent clause in the lexicon of this country is that first dependent clause in the Constitution. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Our union was imperfect at its inception. I can go through the litany of imperfections. If you were a same-sex couple before the Republic was created, and you had a same-sex relationship, that was a death penalty eligible offense in many of the colonies, a death penalty eligible offense. Our Constitution did not address, it promoted, if you will, the scourge of slavery. You look at the Know Nothing movement of the mid-1800s. That was fundamentally an anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-anything that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. You look at the legacy of Jim Crow. You look at the Dred Scott decision. You look at Plessy. Look at the photos of when the Transcontinental Railroad was connected in Utah, when it came together. What is most notable about the photos are who isn't there. The Chinese railroad workers. The Chinese Exclusion Act. The internment of Japanese Americans, the 150-year scourge of the Indian boarding schools, 1820 to 1970. Leonard Peltier, by the way, last thing I worked on in the White House was his pardon. 11/15 on January 20th. Leonard Peltier and his sister were dragged from their home at age 10 and 11. And taken to an Indian boarding school. 150 years, that legacy. And it took until 2024 for a president to formally apologize for it. I could go on and on. The McCarthy era, the civil rights movement. You know, people with disabilities, we all too frequently focus on the first 3 letters of the word disability and not enough on the last 7 letters. This nation has been in these ditches before. And you know how we have climbed out every time? because of gatherings like this. We may not have had the internet. We may not have had social media. May be better off without it some days, I wonder. But we can debate that in another way. But that is what happened. When we saw the suffragette movement of over 100 years ago, I grew up in upstate New York, and the proud history there of women organizing. Every time we've seen this, we've seen not just Dr. King, not just, Medgar Evers, and not just folks organizing on buses, but people organizing everywhere. Telling this country the Bracero movement was a scourge on immigrants. And I'm giving you this string site because, folks, we have been here before, unfortunately, and we find ourselves here again. It is not a uniquely United Statesian phenomenon. It is a global phenomenon. The global winds of nativism are everywhere. The global winds of anti-incumbency, by the way, are everywhere. And when you are an incumbent, whether you're from the right or from the left, don't get too comfortable in those seats because people are lacking, understandably, in patience. And I think that one of the fundamental challenges we have to confront here in this country is the basic bargain of America, or at least the theory of America, Steve, was that every generation is going to be a little bit better off than the previous generation. And that's simply not the lived experience of so many people. And there have been a lot of political leaders, frankly, Democrats and Republicans, I'm not making a partisan statement here, who didn't fully appreciate that reality. And we have to understand that authoritarianism, if you look at the history in Europe, just to take one example, authoritarian leaders emerged in the throes of a democracy. And we can go over that, but we won't, for purposes of brevity. But the reason I come to you with unbridled optimism is because you are the legacy of so many other folks who came here before us and said, you know what? This is not who we are. You are here to say, to those who say the problem with Western civilization is empathy, and a certain person said that recently, you're here to say, no, empathy is who we are. America is great because America is good. And what we have to do here is understand the opportunities that exist. I've worked in local, state, and the federal government. And I think it's so important. And when I'm with students, I always say, Steve, figure out your why question. Two most important days of your life, the day you're born and the day you figure out why. You have nothing to do with the former and everything to do with the latter. And for me, my family's from the Dominican Republic. They came to Buffalo, New York, through a circuitous path. The similarities in the weather, what really brought them there. And, I was a kid when my dad died. My mom almost died that same year. That was a bad year for my family. But I learned the importance of community and resilience. And that's what is embodied in this room. And I figured out that my lane, if you will, my why was making sure the ladder is down with others. Working inside government, which is where I have spent most of my career, local, state, and federal. And I will tell you, I couldn't do it without you. When I was at HHS in the Clinton years, Steve, I used to call my friends very quietly in the disability rights movement. I say, you guys got to get arrested again in front of the building. You helped me out a lot. And they would do it, my friends at ADAPT and other places. Because success is that inside-outside collaboration. And the challenge, and we have to be honest about this, is the hollowing out of the federal bureaucracy that is taking place right now is going to have serious repercussions. The Civil Rights Division that I led In the first term of Obama, we had 400 lawyers at the end. We had about 400 lawyers at the end of the Biden administration. We have 138 lawyers there right now, 120 days into this administration. That's 2/3 attrition. Folks, that's a serious problem. And we need to understand, not have our head in the sand about this, but not look up and wallow in self-pity. This is not the time to wallow. This is the time to act. It's the time to organize. It's the time to understand how we got here. It's the time to understand the importance of social media. And because one of the things we are absolutely getting creamed on is in digital engagement. Misinformation. Back in World War II, you dropped leaflets from airplanes and you had radios. The Germans had radios in every single household. It was a very conscious strategy. Now you can disseminate misinformation at scale and warp speed. And we need to understand that aspect of building out the infrastructure. So again, I come to you, and I want to move on because I didn't mean this to be a speech. But I come to you with that sobriety born out of the seriousness of the moment. But I come to you with that lens of history to say, we have climbed out of these. Think about it. In 2004, a guy with a funny name that nobody ever heard of, 4 years later became president of the United States. We can do this, folks. But it's going to require unprecedented collaboration. It's going to require an understanding at times that idealism and pragmatism are not mutually exclusive. If we insist on perfection as defined by us every single time, we will frequently fail. And that's one of those lessons I learned sometimes the hard way.
There's so much to unpack there. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, we got to get him on a TED Talk, right?
I mean, I'll summarize by saying, watch out, incumbents, and we need to get arrested. That's which may be true. Thank you. I think, and actually, your last point about organizing and about really activating in this moment. I think there's a lot of questions about autocracy. A lot of questions about. My first reaction to your point about incumbents shouldn't get too comfortable was, maybe that's why Congress has conceded all of its role to the executive branch, because they're incumbents who are afraid of the wrath, and there's something there to try to work on collectively. And then I felt like at the end when you talked about organizing, I've been reading a fair amount about autocracy to the extent that I read, and the way in which some of the European countries have pushed back and won back democracy. And a big lesson.
Just this week, by the way.
Just this week, yeah. And a big lesson from that experience is broad-based coalition. And it is in the spirit of broad-based coalition that we really wanted to have the Brennan Center represented in this conversation about our coalition connecting with your coalition, which is in many ways on the front lines of anything having to do with growing democracy and pushing back on autocracy. So thank you for that work. And maybe I would ask you to share a little bit about the work. Pull out your phones again and go to www.brennancenter.org.
Yeah.
And sign up right now. Get on the email list. Let's build that coalition in real time. But can you speak to the work and just introduce yourself to our network? You're very new to us, and you are now a member, and we are like the CIA. Once you're in, you can never leave. So welcome, and please build on Tom, and let's talk about your work.
Of course, and thank you so much for the invitation. I am really delighted to get this introduction to Aspen, in particular this forum. It is, I think, really the most crucial space anybody could be in talking about democracy. And I say that because, not just to flatter you, but because really to get this working, we've got to really focus on the people who are taking over the reins. I'm a Generation Xer. I'll now age myself, but we're caught between, right? We're not large enough to really move the action, but we're caught between the boomers and the folks who are now, I guess, Gen A. very large, diverse, and really in all ways that Tom described, you will have so many more tools than any other generation that preceded you. We need to figure out how to use those tools for good. So I'm really delighted to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about the organization that I represent. My name is Kareem Creighton. I am the vice president who manages one of the offices at the Brennan Center. We're based in New York. I manage the DC office, but we are named for Justice William J. Brennan, who many of you all will probably have heard from stories, one of the leaders on what is the Warren Court. Earl Warren, former governor of California, Chief Justice of the United States, during the time that a lot of really key decisions, many of which Tom referenced in his comments, those were things that the Warren Court is known for. School desegregation, the end to the busing segregation in Montgomery, Alabama, where I grew up, the right to counsel, the ability to get a lawyer when you are involved and poor in a civil lawsuit. All of these things are the right to privacy. All of these things came out to us because of the work that the Warren Court did. Justice Brennan, I'm a voting rights specialist, is known for authoring a key decision that led us to the notion that's now trite, though maybe not given this current court, one person, one vote, a bedrock form of democracy. We are a group of lawyers, researchers, and communications professionals, 180 or 190 of us, all focused on trying to make that dream represented in Justice Brennan's work true. We do that through litigation sometimes, a lot of research, and a lot of messaging strategy to make certain that community groups, nonprofit organizations, and frankly policymakers understand what actually are good ideas that move society forward. We, often find ourselves bridging our litigation partners in the world, the ACLUs, the LDFs, we're partners with them, but also groups that are working directly with communities in states. We are, I'll just say now, deepening our work. It's one of the projects I'm going to be leading, our work in the American South. I told you I grew up in Alabama. I've done a lot of different projects there, including working for a term in the state legislature. And what I know is you see the deficit of what long-term disinvestment in democracy looks like. Actually, in 2017, there was a columnist in Alabama who wrote, I don't know if many of you all had a chance to see it, that, America, you're about to experience Alabamification. It was not a compliment. It was the result of what happens when people get signed on to a way of thinking that suggests that there are those of us that we like that should get every privilege of government, and those of us that they don't, who should get none of it. And what it really means is, one, fewer people get involved in the idea of governance, both in voting and in representation. What it means also is that decisions tend to be made out of, frankly, hate, fear, and not bringing people together who need the help the most. And what it also turns out, and again, I was in the state legislature at the time as a staffer working, it means a lot more corruption because fewer people are watching. The media gets disinvested, and in the absence of any spotlight on activity, legislators do what they want. And they just think, well, if you don't like it, you sue us. Now, I want to get to a point about where we sit in the space of civil society, right? That was the story that definitely applied in the 1960s, where the state government, and many of them in the South, said, look, we are really, committed to this idea of Jim Crow. We will separate black people from white people. We'll even fund black people who want to go to law school. The Supreme Court tells us we have to give you an education. We'll fund you to go to another school. Just don't go in this state, right? That was the system. Civil society stepped up and said, no, we're going to sue you. And there were some courageous judges who said, that eventually found their way to the Supreme Court, we don't think our Constitution allows for that. Well, unfortunately, we're now in a space, 2025, where we see both the courts radically changed, where people now openly question bedrock principles like one person, one vote, or fairness of opening schools and other public facilities to everyone. We also have direct attacks on civil society, and that's what I want to spend a few moments about before telling you some of the work that we're doing to push back against it. It is true that there have been attacks on civil society before. Again, one of those Warren-era cases, the effort by the state of Alabama. We got a lot of civil rights cases, and we weren't on the happy side of the V. But there were people who challenged the NAACP and said, we want to see your membership list. And the Supreme Court said, you know what? There's a First Amendment right that people who are involved in associations because they see themselves as having shared interests, they want to, either exercise their rights to push back against government, they deserve protection. And it isn't your right, government, the state of Alabama, to go in and look at their list for purposes of intimidation. There are open questions as to now whether or not those societies that were entitled in the 1960s to nonprofit status will continue to have that, right? And this is not due to some statute, although there's some that are proposed. They're now sort of fiats that are coming out of the executive agencies that allow people to go investigate. What we don't necessarily know is whether our courts are going to stick to the proposition that was bedrock in these earlier cases, that is inconsistent with the First Amendment. Similarly, we have executive orders going down, radically changing the right to vote. We have fought in any number of cases, I know Tom will remember many of them, where bills that have been brought up to challenge bedrock principles like the Voting Rights Act, right? The law that basically was the result of people organizing and facing violent, as no other way to put it, a violent policy from state governments to prevent black people from doing the radical thing of exercising their constitutional rights to vote. The Voting Rights Act was really the way to make sure that that would never happen again. But we're now in a place where there's a direct assault on it. Not only from the courts that undermine significant portions of the Voting Rights Act, but now from executive orders that intend to put some of the most suppressive policies that couldn't necessarily get through Congress in through fiat. 21 million voters, we've estimated, based on our research, who are on the voting rolls could be taken off if these executive orders follow through. Of course, I'm in Los Angeles. I have to mention, of course, the spate of executive orders that are meant to snatch people off the streets without due process and move them into places outside of the United States jurisdiction without any consideration as to whether they're citizens or whether they've done anything to break the law. Right? That's all executive order, not through any actual act of Congress, through a declared emergency that we actually don't think exists. So what have we done about it? I just want to say a couple of things, because I don't mean to just diagnose problems.
You just want to, at least the judge helped you you're suing Trump over some of these executive orders.
We sure are, okay. Right. We've got 2 lawsuits that we have actually obtained temporary injunctions on. One, stopping the voting rights executive order that would have radically changed election systems for states across the country. And 2, we have gotten an order from the district court saying that this effort to snatch people off the street without due process is presumptively unconstitutional for now, right? But there's still a lot of fight to have. So we're doing that work right now, but I gotta tell you, this is, as Tom said earlier, not gonna just be won in the courts. We can't rely on that totally. We know that without a Congress that steps up and says, look, we have the authority under Article 1 to represent the American people, and we're going to have to actually hold the administration into account. So that's part of the solution. There are elections. This has not been the last slate of elections where most of the people in this country actually showed up to cast ballots. That's a real problem, particularly when we're talking about young people. So I want to encourage, particularly in these states where people have just written off election outcomes, where again, that Alabamification has taken hold, we've got to figure out ways of reminding people that when people show up, things do change, but you got to show up. And all of that depends on work in civil society, not just the Brennan Center in New York and DC, but all of you in these states throughout the country who work day to day with people who I know have lost hope and have some, in all different ways, whether with Democrats or Republicans, felt some sense of disappointment. But power concedes nothing without a demand, and it is civil society's job to remind people that you always have the power to demand it. So we're happy to be in partnership with Aspen. We are delighted any way that we can be helpful with our research, our advocacy, et cetera, to be in concert with you all. And if you're in the Deep South, look us up, because we'll be coming to your neck of the woods pretty soon.
Yeah, we got Mississippi, New Orleans,
Absolutely.
Atlanta, they're all here. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that important work. Okay, so this is another one that's hard to summarize. But ultimately, you're talking about organizing, and you're talking about the same kind of message that Tom left us with in his comments, and I think that's a good enough segue to Brenda. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, the California Endowment has really invested in organizing as the primary focus of your work, and I wonder if, A, you might have reactions as we bring it back to California, and I'm glad you brought up the great Chief Justice, who was a legendary Californian, as part of your summary of the work of Brennan. And let's come to California now, and let's think about the national context that we're hearing about, and then first reactions, and second, maybe you want to speak to how, the role of California on the front lines of resistance, the role you all play as the financiers of resistance, just really reactions, and really tell us about the work here that you're helping to lead, and thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. Welcome to Los Angeles. This is headquarters for the California Endowment, so I have to add that in. It's been really interesting to sit in many rooms where similar conversations are being held around this moment. And I think we've got to shift away from having the conversation about this moment and everything that is happening and what is it that we need to do. And here in California, yes, we are the target. We are at the front lines of funding a lot of power building with a belief that it is through power building that we will affect the kind of change that will allow us to get to a more just California. But power building is all about people, right? And Tom started with we the people. And that is really fundamentally what we need to be thinking about, is how do we encourage and motivate people in this moment to show up and be part of civil society? How do we create instances where we are bringing people together to have conversation, to organize, and to empower people to have a voice, and not let these power brokers that are actually running this country and creating this moment and taking away the power from the people? One of the things that I have recognized, having worked both in California and Montana, is that organizing at the local level is really where things happen. And what I've learned from the significant work that the endowment has funded over the last 15 or so years, particularly around youth organizing, is that youth are really at the front and center of reimagining systems. They are the ones that understand what needs to change because they bring the lived experience. They are the ones that are open to really thinking differently outside of the status quo. And we need to really invest in those youth to organize, to change their local communities, and then affect the change at a larger geographic level, both at the state level, but then also at the federal level. And when we fund youth organizing, we not only think about the organizing part at the endowment, we think about the importance of the healing component, the leadership development component, the opportunity to actually create initiatives and narrative shift. All of these different components are what have transformed many of the activities and organizing efforts that were highlighted this morning, and that many of you represent. So for us at the endowment, we've got to double down on doing this kind of work. The other thing I want to raise is this notion of we the people needs to be thought of differently than just individuals. We have to think about this work in solidarity. I think too often we get comfortable in our whatever it is, whether it's a race group or a gender group or a religious group, and this work is not going to change in the way that we need it to change until we take an approach around solidarity. And I would encourage us to even think beyond sort of what you think of when you think about solidarity, and really think about how do you open the conversation with folks that maybe don't look like you or maybe don't vote like you, but that we need to unite in order to be able to affect the kind of change that happens. I spent 8 years working in Montana. I met many amazing people in that work. And I had an opportunity to live in a place that was radically different from the place I grew up, which was San Francisco. It's just a little different. What I learned through that experience, though, was that people in Montana, young people in Montana, want exactly the same thing that young people in California and in San Francisco want. And yet there is this narrative that it gets created at the national level that pits us against each other. And so we think, we don't have any friends in Montana, and Montana might think those crazy people in California. But the reality is that we need to have these kinds of rooms to be able to create that relationship and figure out how we organize, not just in California, not just in Montana, but how do we organize across the country? Because that is how we're going to bring the voice of the people to this moment. The other thing I want to share is, I didn't know whether I wanted to talk as the immigrant kid, the Montana person, the funder, but I do want to go to the funder role, because at the end of the day, I am running the California Endowment, which is one of the largest funders in California. And I think it's going to be really important for funders in this moment to show up, and to show up differently than we have. So, as funders, we often sit in our little fancy offices looking down and figuring out what it is that is wrong with society and how we can deploy our resources in order to affect the kind of change that we think we need to have. And I have been a big proponent of trust-based philanthropy, which at its core is really about ceding power so that the foundation, the people that work at the foundation, aren't in the power seat making decisions about what needs to be done. That we flip that paradigm and we give the power back to the people, in this case the youth, and say, we need to listen to you, we need to fund you, we need to fund you at the level that you need to do the work, and we need to be really open to whatever it is that needs to be done with those resources. We as a philanthropic kind of field need to start thinking about, we're sitting on billions of dollars. And we only deploy 5% of that every year. We need to be more courageous, dig a little deeper, and be able to resource the work that is most critically important over the next few years. We also need to think differently about how we give. We make everybody, I often describe it as turning into pretzels, jump through hoops, wait for months, you get $100,000 and you got to solve the world's problems in 3 years. We cannot do that. We do not have the time right now. So anybody in this audience that is a funder, please, please think differently about this moment. Think about giving more. Think about empowering your grantees to do the work, and ask your trustees to go beyond that 5%.
So glad. Did you want to add one more thing?
And we're going to do that at the California Endowment.
Awesome. There could be a headline in the LA Times tomorrow. I don't know. That's awesome. Thank you for that. And in many ways, the California Endowment has done the work. You were one of those funders that invested in a bond to be able to do more giving. So to hear you say, like, we're going to do even more in this moment is really a powerful call to action. I noticed a couple of our funders sort of sliding down in their chairs just a little bit, but it's really powerful. I think the work in California has the sort of way in which you've invested in civic infrastructure for over a decade, and in the organizing capacity for equity and justice has been a deep commitment. I'm glad you're doubling down on the youth part of it. That is so exciting. I think that kind of infrastructure is represented in LA. So the competing Californication in my head, Dr. Dre and Snoop, or maybe as Kendrick would say, welcome to LA. Let's bring it now to LA. Thank you for representing the infrastructure that's necessary. You're doing this work on the front lines, Priscilla, and you heard a lot about how do we support young people, how do we bring young people deeper into the democracy movement, let them set the agenda, and then make the change that we need to create a more equitable and just world. Tell us about what you're hearing from the young people you work with, the ways in which you all are working, building the infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that TCE is invested in to make these significant changes. You've had some wins. What are you hearing from young people related to this conversation?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, very honored to be here amongst this wonderful panel, and also representing the young leaders who truly are at the heart of what I'm bringing today, both past, current, and future. So really excited to be looking at the young leaders right now. As a systems change project manager who started out as a fellow, and that's also a former foster youth, I feel this urgency within my bones. Just listening to my fellow panelists, it's become much more clear that democracy doesn't just live in Washington or doesn't just happen in a voting booth. Democracy happens in the streets. Right. Democracy lives in the fight that we do locally with and for young people. And I resonate deeply with all of these conversations. I feel a sense of responsibility, not to my title or this panel, but to the young people I serve and to the young people I work alongside with. And I think everyone in this room also feels that responsibility, especially in this moment. And when I think about protecting democracy, I think about, I don't necessarily think about Capitol Hill advocacy necessarily. I think about foster youth that live their entire lives in undemocratic systems. There's a laundry list of examples, but they have their own foster youth Bill of Rights, and yet they're constantly routinely denied those rights. So, if democracy is about protection, voice, choice, our systems are failing, and arguably they're working exactly how they intended to work, to control, to silence, to protect the elites. And if we want to rebuild that trust in democracy, we need to center the voices of those that are systematically excluded: young people, Black and Indigenous communities, queer folks, immigrants, the working class. That is at the heart of what the young leaders do. They represent this. So we need to hear from young people. We need to hear from the strawberry pickers, the teachers, the social workers, the survivors. And I'm very honored to work with the LA Opportunity Youth Collaborative as the co-lead and co-facilitator of the Young Leaders Program. And again, another shout out, they're just badass. They're just badass, man. Oh man, and excited we've expanded. We have 2 more hubs. Our Youth Mentoring Nexus Visionaries and the Horizons 32K Youth Advisory Council, and of course our longstanding Directors Youth Advisory Council and the young leaders, many of whom are former and current foster youth, work together not just to give feedback but to redesign the child welfare system from within. So the Directors Youth Advisory Council is a true partnership and collaboration with the Department of Children and Family Services. And we work to enhance and transform policy, practices, and programming for transition age youth in care. And our big accomplishment, what we're super proud of and excited to launch, is our youth engagement section, which is essentially a section dedicated to supporting young people authentically, to providing holistic relationship-based supports, and with that, the charge was always led with young people. And I think the note here is truly that when we weren't focused on changing policies per se. We were focused on changing values. And that's what we hear from young people, is that we want to be incorporated into all phases of change, from identifying the problem to co-designing solutions. We want systems to meet us with trust, not control, with partnership, not pity. And I think YES is a great example of that. And when you let young people lead, systems change happens. Systems transform. Yeah, and I think to end, I think I might be jumping ahead, but you're asking protecting democracy, right? We're talking about democracy, I think democracy is a worthy fight. Like it is worthy, but one that is rooted in love and collective liberation, with shared values. And when we dehumanize people or view people as less subhuman, deny people the right to exist with dignity, that are faced with violence and oppression, that's not a political difference, that's a values deficit. And with our work, our work centers humanity, and we call it, we use BMWP and healing-centered engagement, but really what's going on is something rooted in love, community, and power, sharing with young people at the helm of all of that. And so so yes, protect democracy, it's worthy, but it must be rooted in our shared values. It must be something that we value, and we need to organize. We need to get organized about how we organize. We need a collective vision of liberation. We need values rooted in love, justice, community, and hope. And once we have those, the strategies come, the campaigns come, the wins come, but we need to be unified in what we believe in and what we want to see. So protect democracy, sure, but let's rebuild something together. Because that's what we're doing. That's what we need to do.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And brought it all the way to where we're at. The beloved community. Brenda, do you want to respond just a little bit? Because I heard your point of view represented in that. And you have done a listening tour as you've embraced the new CEO role. Does this resonate with what you've heard from folks when you've been out there talking to grantee partners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the things I've been hearing, and I've traveled across the state in the last few months talking to our grantees, it's got to be rooted in values, and that it's got to be rooted in power, and it's got to be rooted in reimagination and system transformation. That it's not about tinkering around the edges, that it's not about tokenism, that it's not about let's just kind of fix these little things, but like how do you really transform the work? So I think it is definitely resonating for me, not just what we hear here today, but what I'm hearing across the state.
Tom?
I was listening to all of you, and I was having a flashback to when I was in law school many years ago, decades ago, I should say. I had the privilege of participating in a small luncheon where the speaker was Justice Brennan. And this connects really a lot of folks saying. Question, who's your best friend on the court? Answer, Justice Rehnquist. Justice Rehnquist, for though I'm looking here and I'm seeing that there's a few people south of 25. Justice Rehnquist, the later Chief Justice Rehnquist, was their worldviews couldn't have been more different, but they figured out common ground. Whenever I go to a conference like this, or we have retreats in our office, I always ask myself, what are 2 or 3 things I'm going to do differently as a result of spending time here? And one thing I would observe that we as a community need to do better is understanding folks who may have made choices at the ballot box that are different than ours, and may seem at first blush to exude there's no common ground there. But if you look hard enough, you can find it. And there are a lot of folks, there are a lot of Latinos who voted differently than me in 2024. And I think it's important to look at that with humility, not with disdain. And to understand that. Developing that capacity, I feel like at times we talk past each other as communities. And again, the Rehnquist-Brennan friendship, the Ted Kennedy, I worked for Ted Kennedy, one of his best friends in the Senate was Orrin Hatch. Yeah. He did a bill with Strom Thurmond. He had a capacity to, I call it, the Venn diagram. We have to work harder to figure out where that overlap is. And I think there's so much at stake. And I know I've been doing some work in another part of my life right now to listen to people. People who, take a shower after work, not before work. Because they're working. I worked on the back of a trash truck, to make money in college. And I don't feel like we are listening enough to folks who are concerned that their generation's getting screwed. And when you have that fear, then you are open to folks who may be, carnival barkers, but they're resonating with you. And so, I hope that the organizing can bring that together because I think we all have to do more of that. There are some really good people out there in communities who have voted differently than we, but they're good people.
Yeah. And if I can jump in here, I think this is what is so amazing about this gathering here today. It's a forum of young people doing this work across the country. Like this is the space, right, where this change needs to start happening, where you find that Venn diagram. So like if you're sitting at a table with all your friends, change it up, folks.
Yeah.
Go sit with someone
right.
that you don't know. Go have a conversation because you will find that there's a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram.
I am struck, and let's come to you if you have time. Thank you. I am struggling to reconcile that with your point about social media, Tom, and the sort of radical misinformation and the power of conspiracy theories right now, and how do you bridge that? And so that we'll save that for another panel. But it is an interesting moment. I'll just say, I'm old school. When I fly into places, I don't do Uber, I do the taxi cabs. And I was in a cab last week in DC with an immigrant from Senegal who voted for Trump. And I was in a cab yesterday in LA with an immigrant from Cameroon who voted for Trump. And we had these conversations about, where they were at. And I was saying, well, to the guy yesterday, I was like, you're a US citizen, an immigrant. You have kids? Yes. They're born here, so they're naturalized citizens. Right now, there's a case, the Trump administration has issued an executive order that's being challenged in the courts that would take away any future children you might have, maybe even, and he didn't know about it, right? And he also rationalized it by saying, I think there's good and bad in everybody. And I was hoping the economy would be better. And so there's a bridge building, but there's also an information sharing challenge right now. And I think we have to think through the ways in which we cut through the din. And I really appreciated your point about losing the social media battle full on. And there's a struggle in truth telling, and maybe part of it is to bring accountability through the courts, But what else? And,
Yeah.
and please build on the conversation.
And
Sorry.
only part of it. I mean, I think that's part of the, we have an institutional structure. We've got to, keep moving in a particular direction. But I really want to build on what we've heard today, because I think so much of it, particularly for young people, is a world that is, happening on social media. There's plenty of research now talking about the ways, in particular, young men, but really young people generally are inhabiting spaces like the gaming world and social media generally, and that is how the landscape of how they understand the way the world works gets formed. And just as important as I agree, we should be talking to people who voted differently. Let's not forget the people who just chose not to vote at all. And we definitely have to approach those conversations with places of grace, because I think often what we lose track of is these are people who often feel so left out, dejected, ignored, that they think they're all crooks. I mean, I've heard that version of it, and I don't want anything to do with it. But again, you may not want anything to do with the system, but the system will have everything and the decisions that it makes. And I so appreciated the points about the foster community. It affects you. Regardless of whether you show up and make a decision is going to be made that affects you. So why not figure out how to get as much as you can out of this system is the conversation. And you have to do that from a place of love. I'm so glad you mentioned that. So how do we, have impact in those spaces where traditionally I think we've not played? I think people have thought that, the traditional, I taught political science for a number of years, you'd have engagement either in the courts or in Congress, and that changes policy. And yes, Schoolhouse Rock told that story. And to some degree, that's true. But the game has changed, right? A lot of politics gets played out, small p politics, in what people hear in these places that aren't regulated. Right? In the places where the algo, right, does all the work. Who knows what, corporation or interest is deciding how the algo works. We've got to be able to play in those spaces as well. And I do think it's not necessarily the most complex thing on the planet. I don't know, how many of y'all heard of the boots on the ground line dance? Anybody? The fact that you know what that is, and the fact that all these people in a very short amount of time figure out how to do it, I still am trying to figure it out, right? But there's a genius to that, right? A very complex cultural moment where people understand, I'm going to move in a particular way to show my joy. Maybe I don't like the way the world is, but I can sure do this line dance. But I can cooperate with other people who live on the other side of the country who I've never seen before. You saw the former vice president doing boots on the ground with an influencer. I don't know that they even practiced that stuff, but they knew how to do it. My point is that you can come up with an idea, right? As simple as a line dance, as much as you can come up with an idea that, you know what? Maybe the people currently in office aren't really serving our interests. If we can think of creative ways of communicating using spaces like social media, both to say, look, here's something positive that we want you to do. I mean, people do this for any number of things. Buy a widget, get this, product. Why not get involved with government? Find somebody who thinks the way that you do about what the current policy is that you don't like, and think of what you might want to do to change it. That doesn't mean it has to be a radical, big production at the state legislature. It could mean showing up at your city council and speaking up with your elected leader to say, you know what, we really care about this and we want you to care about it too. It starts small. And I just want to say one last thing. I so appreciate the conversation about love. What resonated with me was a young I think he may have been 27, 28-year-old John Lewis standing at the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington. And he actually was 23 at the time. And he says something quite radical. And this is what young people can do. He says, and he's the youngest person speaking at the march, and he says, you know what, to Jim Crow, we're going to tear your kingdom down. But he didn't stop there. I love to remind people this. He said, and we're going to rebuild it in the image, he said, of God. I see that to mean love. To rebuild it in the image of love in our fellow man. That's the radical affirmative vision. That's the kind of thinking we've got to start sharing with people. Because people will fight to stop a bad thing, no question. But I think the challenge for us is to imagine what the world could be, perfected in ways that have left people out in the past, and sell people on why it's important to invest in it. Because if they do that, they will do a lot of hard things. But we can't get that if we don't get the vision. And we have to be, whether it's boots on the ground or whatever, in unison about how we're going to do the work.
Beautiful. Thank you. We have just a little more time, so I'm going to encourage each of you, if you have a closing thought, a closing reflection, a closing pushback on my gentle pushback, please, and then we'll bring it home. And we don't have time for Q&A, but y'all can hang around for a little while for folks to bring their questions to you, I hope, if that's okay. Any quick building reflections? We're on the right path. Like, love can conquer all. Gandhi called it love force or soul force. And obviously, King introduced this idea of a beloved community to our country, well, others before him. We're going to build towards that. I'm coming away optimistic. Thank you, guys. But final thoughts, final reflections, please, anyone.
One of my favorite biographers is a guy named Walter Isaacson. And very familiar to the Aspen Institute, to state the obvious.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, he was CEO of the Aspen Institute for over a decade.
Yes, and you know, his biography of Ben Franklin is one of the most read biographies around. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this, but you know, when they were ratifying, debating the Constitution, and they voted on all these provisions in Philadelphia. And one of the last questions he was asked was, do we have a monarchy or a republic? His answer, a republic, if we can keep it.
Yeah.
So, you know, my whole, you know, sort of presentation has been about, you know, we've been through these journeys. We have confronted similar issues. That question that was asked 250 years ago is a question that is as relevant now. And the answer over the last 250 years in this greatest experiment of democracy, notwithstanding all the warts, there's been so much that has been accomplished during this. And the reason why it has been kept is because people have risen up. And when I look in this audience and I see people of all generations here, but in particular when I see so many young people, I'm looking at you, sir, and so many others, I'm inspired. And just remember, we gave the good answer to Ben, and we're going to give a good answer again today.
Excellent. Thank you. Brenda, do you have a closing?
I do firmly believe that this moment in saving democracy and civil society is really dependent on us empowering and funding youth. And we've got to do it deeply, because you all are the ones that are going to reimagine with love and create new structures, and this is the moment.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Marcia, anything you want to add?
Yeah. Again, just honing in on this idea of radical love embedded into everything that we do, especially having that value as a guidepost as we move forward in this moment, because you really can't go wrong. It keeps you honest. And to the young people and the young leaders and all the youth and the youth at heart out there, keep hope alive. We really need to be hopeful about what we can accomplish together and what we can build together, because what we can build is going to be beyond our wildest dreams. And that is the beauty, and that is love creating. So again, thank you so much to the young leaders, past, present, and future, and all the young people that have brought me to this place, and I'm honored to be working alongside you guys.
Final word? Thank you.
No pressure. I'll keep it simple. I'm just going to build off of love. I believe that love, like democracy, ought to be treated like an action word. That is, you don't just let it be, you have to do something to get it. So I just implore everybody in this room to think about whatever place you occupy, wherever you happen to live, who you happen to talk to. Think of what it means to take action to make love and democracy real in your lives and the lives of the people around you.
Fantastic. Let's give these guys a round of applause. This is why you have to have the conversation. I was thinking, like, are we going to talk about whether we're in a constitutional crisis or not? And you know what? It really don't matter, because we're going to rise up together collectively with love. Thank you all very much. Here's Mo to help close us out. Thank you, guys.
Thank you to this awesome panel to get in design studios, followed by some affinity meetings for people who need to dance some boots on the ground tonight. That will be happening at the Healing Jam. And then we'll be back here at 8 tomorrow, y'all. Thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.
It was so fun.
It was.
Good.